Okay. George, we didn't get a response to you about the middle class, and I think you had something that you wanted to add about dealers.
Well, when people ask, is the middle class disappearing? I don't think it's disappearing statistically. There's always going to be middle class, but I think what is disappearing is jobs that provided extremely high wages and benefits for people with relatively low skills. I'm looking here at the data for Ford before the last contract, and essentially the take-home pay for a Ford worker was about $32 an hour, and the benefits were around $38 an hour. Mm-hmm. So essentially the cost to Ford of employing that person was about $70 an hour. Now those are the kind of jobs, particularly for somebody with no skills and who've been working there for a long time. Those are the ones that are going to be hard to replace.
Patrice?
Mm-hmm. I think what he said is correct, that those are the kinds of jobs, because they don't require a great education or training. They can easily, and have been essentially, shipped overseas. And any country in the world now can make cars. They make them in Brazil, China. These are the countries which probably will be making more cars in the future. In our country, we'll be making fewer cars. So the trend for quite a long time has been for higher skilled jobs and higher education. That is the way to preserve our middle class. To make sure that you go to college and certainly finish high school, mm-hmm. and get some kind of training outside of high school, whether going to college or some specialized thing. Exactly, and learn what you need to learn in high school. So this is the future. If you want to be in the middle class in America, that's how you do it. You don't drop out of high school and expect to have a great middle class job with great benefits handed to you anymore.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Fred, you're there in Michigan where the rubber actually meets the road.
Yes.
And I know that across the country there are some communities where we have 50% high school dropout rate. Can you talk to us about what the prospects are for the middle class in Michigan first, and then what you see in your travels across the country?
Sure. Michigan has been going through difficulties with the automobile industry now for 30 years. I lost my job twice, in '75 and again in '79, in the first oil and gas crises that took place.
And what were you doing with Ford?
At that time, I was working on the line at Chicago Assembly Plant. The first time. The second time I lost my job, I was on the line at General Motors at '78. So the second time I lost my job is when I went back to school, and then I was lucky and got back into Ford as an engineer. But overall, the employment here has been dropping and dropping. And the idea that about these jobs, I mean, let's say one thing is it's very hard to work in a factory. That's the reason the UAW won 30 and out. You are exhausted after working in a factory 10, 12 hours a day for 30 years. So let's give respect where it's due. These people have worked in those factories. They have made the billions for these companies that was wasted by bad management, and then later on by the speculators who came in and and did their damage here too. So I think you have to be clear about who we're talking about here. And as far as education goes, people are leaving Michigan. We're one of the two states that are actually suffering a decrease in population. So people get degrees and they leave Michigan. So that's another thing that needs to be said about what's happening here. But I guess and we have, and the devastation in Detroit. One of the people who's on the street seems to know about that. As you maybe remember, we had 45,000 people get their water cut off by the publicly owned waterworks in Detroit.
That's right.
In a given year. So we have poverty rate in Detroit as of 2007, before this downturn, was over 33%. So we have, and that's a pocket of poverty in Detroit, in Flint, where Michael Moore talks about Flint, in Saginaw, all these pockets of essentially black cities where there are high levels of poverty. There's no plan that I can see that's going to try to alleviate that poverty at all. And that's the question that I, as a Green and as a Michigan person, really care about. What is our plan for turning this around? I don't see a plan, either in the bankruptcy proceedings with General Motors or in the Obama stimulus package.
Our reporter, Ernie Cruz, has a report. Let's go to that now.
There's going to be a lot of human suffering, and none of it's necessary.
GM dealers are furious that the company will eliminate 2,000 franchisees as part of its bankruptcy agreement with the White House task force.
We are convinced that these dealership cuts are being mandated by the audit task force. There's no question in our mind that that's the case. I don't believe
by the White House.
By the White House.
They extended themselves to take care of the board and management. Can you imagine that? They took tax dollars to help people that ruined the company, and then they're running over small businessmen and putting people out of work.
They blamed the White House for the decision, saying it was a precondition for authorizing the automaker's bankruptcy deal.
GM and Chrysler, you know, the management that drove them into bankruptcy, they're the winners because they're going to keep their jobs and they're going to get bonuses.
These dealership closures mean thousands of salespeople, managers, office workers, and mechanics nationwide may lose their jobs.
More than 100,000 people will probably lose their jobs across the country in this. Some people have said as many as 300,000. Depends on how many in each dealership, you know.
Expect losses from many of the companies that do business with dealers, from part suppliers to advertising.
You know, we use all the same things that the manufacturers use. We have to buy from suppliers, too. So the ripple effect is there.
These losses are in addition to the 20,000 jobs that will be lost as GM closes 12 factories. GM is getting rid of its Hummer, Saturn, Saab, and Pontiac brands, some by sale, others by elimination. The automaker is hoping that by focusing on more gas-efficient and higher-quality cars, it may be able to entice Americans to buy American once again. But the wait will be painful, and not just for GM workers. As more and more GM dealerships close, the impact will be felt far beyond the workers in the auto industry, because as these cars go away and these showrooms disappear, this land stops generating tax revenue for state and local governments. And with less money in their budgets, cuts may also be coming for government employees. And Frederick, I'm Ernie Cruz.
It's pretty clear who's losing. But in this transaction, there's also somebody who's winning. Investigative journalist Greg Palast wrote a piece entitled Grand Theft Auto, in which he shares with us a little bit about who's winning. Let's see what he had to write. They may be crying about General Motors' bankruptcy today, but dumping 40,000 of the last 60,000 union jobs into a mass grave won't spoil Jamie Dimon's day. Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase Bank. While GM workers are losing their retirement health benefits, their jobs, their life savings, while shareholders are getting zilch and many creditors getting hosed, a few privileged GM lenders, led by Morgan and Citibank, expect to get back 100% of their loans to GM, a stunning $6 billion. George, it's clear Citibank and JP Morgan are winners. Is this fair?
Well, let's examine what's being said there. They loaned GM money. Most of the people that loan GM money are getting nothing back. The stockholders are getting wiped out. A lot of the employees are losing their jobs. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the dealer thing, because I think that it's crocodile tears as much as anything for them. I mean, the dealership bodies were vastly overextended, and the dealers got franchise laws which essentially prevented any rationalization of their system. So I'm not feeling sorry for the dealers.
Crocodile tears is pretty strong language.
I mean it.